alarms on each end of the village, right, Marcia? How long ago was that? A couple years ago that we got those?
3 years ago, and we're replacing the poles because the woodpeckers made holes. So they're an ongoing issue.
Are these self-powered ones that the main power goes out, these
Yeah.
ones are self-powered? So they are the newer variety, yeah, well,
I mean, the
that's.
problem, it's not a problem, but we can control parts of it.
Mhm.
And I think, I think if, and John's here, so he'll bring it to Protective Services. We have the ability to go in and Fire Chief Doug Smith can talk. You can actually talk on them.
Oh, yeah?
So there can be
Speakers.
all clear, yeah, I mean, they're clear enough, because when we tested them, we talked. And then people called to ask what we were talking about.
The other interesting aspect of
Yeah,
it,
it's a very good system that, we don't set off the alarms because it's Walton
Probably
County.
thought they were
But I
breaking the
think
open
we can
meetings
certainly
law.
talk about how can we let people know it's okay to come out and party.
Yes.
yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of any damage that was done a couple of days ago when we had that?
Nothing around here.
Nothing was around here,
Everything was
fortunately.
south of the state line.
This is David Hansen, he's a storm chaser.
Yeah.
It was
It
mostly
was
in
all pretty much
Illinois.
south of the state line, although it got really scary close. The one big tornado was heading towards the Wisconsin state line, but it did not, as far as I know, it did not cross.
One east of Lake Geneva did set down by Boner's
brief one.
Lake. And that initially looked like it was gonna clip the east side of Lake Geneva. However, it shifted to the east at the very last moment.
They went over Woodstock and Hebron.
To Woodstock and Hebron, yes, ma'am.
The weather people explained it this way. As it approached, it ran into some colder weather, and that changed its path and the severity of it.
Yeah, it's
Which
called
is
a cold.
interesting.
Well, it was
because it likes
really
warm
interesting. If you imagine this is the Illinois-Wisconsin line. South of the line, it was hot air.
Mhm.
And it was like right at the border, it was cold air. So we were very fortunate to have the cold in April because it really slowed down and dissipated that front that was moving from the south.
Right, we were out by the Faith Christian earlier, and we knew we weren't gonna get much because we're getting a consistent colder east-northeast wind, so that's why we headed south into Illinois.
Right.
We're gonna get anything up here.
Thank goodness that it did, because all day long, if you were monitoring the weather, this warm front was rushing really quickly to the north. And so warm front is always a concern this time of year because this is generally what happens. When that warm front hits the cold front, we have conflict. Marcia?
What was that we had then a couple years ago when all the trees came down in the Conservancy and some homes were?
That was called a straight line wind.
Yeah.
It was not a tornado, there was no rotation involved, it was like a microburst. Giant blast of air comes down, spreads out, sometimes in all directions, sometimes it comes down and then just moves forward.
Is that the same thing that happened in Elkhorn a few years earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those can be pretty bad, they do a lot of serious damage.
And because if you remember along 67 in Ishwaukee, all the trees were going towards the east. So apparently the microburst came down and burst forward. Yes,
The
Ray.
1965 tornado, it did not hit Yerkes Observatory, the huge building there, it went around it, or?
It didn't, and I'm really puzzled. I would have thought there would have been some damage there, but as far as I know, absolutely
No,
nothing.
and where the damage was is,
The trees,
several yards, I mean, or maybe half a mile, quarter of a mile.
yeah.
That's a long driveway. And it was right at Geneva Street where the damage
Right, it's
was.
the same thing, straight line.
Yeah, right.
We also have our own mini tornado alley here, west of us, between Delavan, Whitewater, on up towards East Troy. Watch this summer, later this spring, when the storms start coming up and forming. It's like we have a little bubble over us. They either go over Lake Geneva to the east, or the Delavan, Whitewater track towards East Troy. And we're very fortunate because we haven't really, other than the straight line winds we just discussed.
I think the lake has a lot of effect on it.
It can. The temperature of the lake does affect the air above it and the currents. And they're on record, I know of 2 water spouts, which are tornadoes over water that were reported. There was one in the late 1950s, early 60s, and then one in 1898. And that's just like a regular tornado, except it forms over water. Before you leave, if you lived here in 1965, we would certainly appreciate you putting a sticker, this is where I lived in 1965, if you would put a sticker where you lived. And then we're going to put the track of the tornado on this map. Those of you who have Facebook, the Williams Bay Historical Society has a Facebook page. We're going to be posting various information this week on this event and the 1965 tornado. This week is the state of Wisconsin. Governor Walker declared it Tornado Awareness Week. So pay attention. Share with your friends the information you've learned. Your pamphlet has information on tornado safety, what a tornado is, the actual path of the tornado in Williams Bay. So when you get a chance, look it over, and you guys are all qualified tornado experts now. We're good to go. Yes, ma'am.
On the Palm Sunday one, after the tornado left Como, it went over Springfield, which is north of Lake Geneva. And there was a lady there that lived there that had an apple tree in her backyard. Across the street was a small Methodist church. It blew the doors open, moved the church about 6 inches on the foundation, but all her apples were at the altar.
The Lord works in mysterious ways. Wow. On the altar.
Yeah, I don't know of any other damaged buildings there from that. I can't think of any.
Can you imagine what that process must have looked like? I mean, wow, incredible. Yes, ma'am.
But you do hear strange stories. You
Oh, yeah.
can see pieces of straw forced into a fence post. Now,
Can't
that
imagine.
takes
Yeah.
a
A lot of force to drive something so fragile into something so hard and keep it intact. It's incredible. Marcia, did you have something?
No, I was just pointing at Muriel.
Thank you. Yes,
Like I was explaining to you before, we were in Elkhart, Indiana, and you told me it was the same weekend, and we had 3 tornadoes come in, which is very rare because we had the upper and lower St. Joe, we had the Elkhart River, and it destroyed Dunlap, Indiana. There wasn't anything left.
the Elkhart tornado was where the F5 was recorded, and it was a double tornado. On the front of your,
Oh, you see the
this
picture of
is,
it.
this is the Elkhart, Indiana double tornado.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine, one tornado is bad enough, but I can't imagine two. April 11th, 1965. We did have fatalities in Wisconsin. 3 people up by Jefferson were in their vehicle. It got picked up and thrown into a ditch, and they were killed when their vehicle did this. Dave and I were on a bridge over I-90 in Beloit when the tornado hit us, and I can remember seeing a vehicle passing us. It's a 4-lane. He picked up, turned upside down, and it was thrown between the bridges, and then we were buffeted off the guardrail to the end of the tree. So it was an adventure. F1 here.
That's a 138 or 178 mile an hour wind.
Yep.
No,
And
it's
that's a lot of
80, 60.
air power. Yeah, I mean, a lot of air power. But when you go up, if you look in your booklet to the size of an F5,
No.
winds in excess of 200 miles an hour. 69% of all tornadoes are considered weak tornadoes. They last 1 to 10 minutes and have winds under 110 miles an hour. Strong tornadoes are 29% of all tornadoes. They cause nearly 30% of all tornado deaths, however. And they can last 20 minutes or longer and have wind speeds 110 miles an hour to around 200. F4s and F5s, the very worst kind of tornado, only 2% of tornadoes ever reach that stage. They do cause 70% of all tornado deaths, though, if they are on the ground. And their lifetime, they can be on the ground for an hour. I mean, you see, if you have a computer and go to YouTube, and just punch in the videos of tornadoes. It's phenomenal how many different types of tornadoes you can see. Some stay a long time on the ground, others are constantly going up and down and having baby tornadoes reforming. It's very interesting as long as you're not there. Dave?
One of the, talking about the tornado tracks, the longest track tornado ever in history in the United States was in 1923, was on the ground for over 300 miles. It was over a mile wide for most of its, it was called a tri-state tornado. And it alone, just recently, they finally declared that it was only one tornado continuously on the ground for over 300 miles. It killed over 700 people.
This was in 1925.
1925, yeah.
And it hit Rock County to the west of us and
And
caused
it just kept
numerous
going
deaths
into
there.
Indiana and then curved up. And it's very strange how the path took it. It would aim towards a community and then hit the community and move on. And just before it died, there was a small town, remember the name of the town? It turned right towards the town but then died on the last part of its little journey. But it was the very first tornado damage path that was ever photographed from the air, and it was continuous. But people didn't see it, they saw it, but they didn't think it was a tornado. It didn't look like a tornado. They
And
thought
they
it was
have
a...
many different
Yeah.
looks. Some of them are
So they were
bright
caught off
white.
guard, many of them.
Some of them are invisible. All you see is debris going up, and until it gets enough debris to get a color, then you can see it more. Tornadoes at night are almost impossible to see simply because it's dark, and unless you catch it in a lightning flash, you're not going to see it. And we have many tornadoes after 8 p.m. that form and cause damage. The last couple, Joplin, Missouri, was a nighttime tornado. It was after midnight when that tornado hit. So it can happen anytime, anywhere. Tornadoes have been recorded in every single month of the year. Yes, ma'am.
I understand that the tail can move around.
Oh, yeah.
The tail,
It hops.
it hops. It goes up and down and up and down. And it also moves in a circular motion. One of the very first ways tornado severity was measured was by, if you're in an airplane, Dr. Fujita, the day after our tornado, the gentleman who categorized the strengths of tornado, went up in a plane over the tornado areas. And how he measured the strength of the tornadoes was, he looked at the loops that the tornadoes made on the ground, because you can actually see them from a plane where the tornado went. The wider the loop, the weaker the tornado. The tighter the loops, more severe. And it's amazing how we've evolved in 50 years from using that to gauge it to all the amazing scientifically computerized information that we have at our fingertips, each of us, today, as compared to what we had in 1965. Yes, ma'am?
Is Dr. Fujita local?
No. Where's Dr. Fujita out of?
University
He
of
was at
Chicago.
University of Chicago. He's gone now. I do believe he's at.
Tell us your tale about Richard Dreiser.
He had a young, Dr. Fujita had a young assistant back in 1980. He was now Richard Dreiser, who's the information director at Yerkes.
So we do have a connection with Dr. Fujita. But he did, I have Dr. Fujita's survey of our tornado event, if anybody's interested in looking at it. It's very interesting reading, and Williams Bay is mentioned in the first couple pages of the document. Yes?
So just west of the Phillips 66 and Daddy Maxwell's, where those apartments and condos are, was that the farm where Old Bill was, or was that?
Across the street
Across the
from there,
street.
on the same side where the water department is, the next field over.
Yeah.
Oh, was that
If I'm
block
the water
wiped out?
department and you're Daddy Maxwell's,
Right,
it was right here.
and then those new apartments, which are all built, looks like the 70s. Was that a farm, or were those houses that were struck, or?
I can't remember. Tom, can you remember where the homes there at that point, where the apartments are behind Daddy Maxwell's?
That was fake.
They were just homes.
That was all vacant.
Vacant land.
Vacant land.
Vacant land. Vacant land, that was vacant land.
That's the consensus here.
Very good. We go with the consensus. Yes.
Our heads vacant.
That had a storm
Got it,
shelter.
Marcia.
It was just out of, what do we call it?
Corrugated metal.
Metal. Right behind where all the damage was done, nothing was done on that. Just across the street.
I went to Oklahoma City a month after the massive F5 tornado there. And numerous times as we were driving through the damaged areas, it looks like an atomic bomb has gone off on this side, because an F5 actually generates the power of an atomic bomb. Nothing, for as far as you see. Homes with garbage cans outside, not moved, opposite side of the street. There just is no rhyme, no reason to what occurs during a tornado. Yes, ma'am?
In the mid-90s, I lived in the apartment above my sister's in her home. And we were having a storm and a lot of wind. And I'm sitting in my living room and I could feel, this is a well-built 1903 home, a big home. And I could feel the house shiver. Later, I called Mary up and we went to the basement. She came up and we could feel it shiver. The next day, we learned we had 81-mile-an-hour winds. Now, that's scary.
That is scary, and what's
Scary to feel your house
amazing,
shiver.
but it still stood. That's incredible. They built things good. I don't know today if our construction is at the peak where we could